Hello, and welcome to Woman with Bunny Ears, a Twin Peaks podcast, Season 3, Episode 5, also called We Want Headbands, a 4-syllable and 1-character podcast and baseline. Today, we will be discussing Book 9, again, outtakes and listener feedback. I am your host, Byzantium Flashy Man.
And I am your host with 7 cleric levels, Cakoluchiam.
Nice. So, yes, we've decided that for reasons of, it taking time to read, we're probably going to go to a schedule of every other week. We will cover a whole book. And on the weeks when we don't do that, we'll cover listener feedback. And hopefully everyone will enjoy this.
Yay. So that also gives you all more time to give us some feedback in our wonderful Discord. And by our wonderful Discord, I mean the Bayesian Conspiracies Discord, in
Yes.
which we have appropriated a channel.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah. Oh, and
So
then
do you want...
also, after the feedback this episode, we will include a long digression that was in the previous episode, but we took out for being too tangential.
Right.
So that'll be fun.
So this will be a book 9 supplement. We'll have some feedback from book 9 and then some outtakes from our book 9 episode. So we'll get to actual book 10 next week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I can just jump into some feedback. I noted down here. Yeah, and I happened to start this list, so I got all my things on the list first. The first piece of
we can
feedback
alternate if you like, because it looks like we do have just about the same number.
That is true. So the first piece of feedback is from Fergum Nemehodva, who says, you're joking about devils, but Pathfinder does have demons and daemons, Daemons, which are distinct entities, which is, I think, that's a very funny distinction for them to make.
That is just confusing. I actually did not know that demons and daemons were different. I figured that was just a stylistic choice.
Yeah, I think it's like, well, first of all, you pronounce daemons as demon in English, so
right.
It's like impossible to tell them apart. And I think the word demon does come from the word daemon, which basically just means like a spirit.
Yeah. So I guess, does that mean that demons with an A are not necessarily chaotic spirits?
I don't know. I didn't look into it any further.
Oh my. Okay.
I just took it on faith.
Y'all can add us in the channel.
I'll just Google it whilst you do the next piece of feedback.
Give our next feedback. All right. So I have some feedback from the one butcher, and this is because I think I'm about cleared up, but I was still a bit confused about the whole crucifixion thing. And the one butcher has an analogy here to Harry Potter, and he says that it was somewhat covered in the methods of rationality thick. And he quotes, this isn't a quote. This is a quote from the one butcher. Why does Voldemort put Harry's parents in Azkaban? Well, because if he does, he can buy Harry's cooperation by promising not to put them in Azkaban. If Harry categorically refuses to buy Voldemort doesn't put my parents into Azkaban, Voldemort has no reason to put them into Azkaban. There would be no point in putting them into Azkaban because it would be worthless as a bargaining chip. So that's the first part of the quote. There's a bit more, but that's interesting because Voldemort in canon was probably not that smart. And also, I mean, the whole Azkaban not being controlled by Voldemort thing, kind of a tenuous connection. But I feel like Voldemort would put Harry's parents into Azkaban anyway, and I'm not sure if I think that just because I think Voldemort is a dick, because even in the methods of rationality, he's got that character basically of just being insane and insanely evil, despite whatever intelligence he has. So yeah, like this whole no reason to put them into Azkaban thing. I think in the case of Voldemort, that doesn't really work because Voldemort's evil. But if we look at this instead of Voldemort, we look at a government, then it starts to make sense, I think. And the one butcher continues. Crucifixion is a bad example because it causes there to be less tax evaders by killing them. Uh, Note, threatening Harry's parents does not. Uh, I don't know if that's in reference to the tax evaders, but uh, let's say tax evaders get crucified with ropes for one day and then let down. They would buy I Don't Get Tortured the Day After Tax Day with their tax money. If they refuse to buy that, then the government would have no reason to crucify people because it wouldn't make people pay their taxes. So in this case, we have a punishment that depends on people anticipating being punished, and that being the thing that disincentivizes them from doing something bad. But the punishment itself doesn't actually solve the problem. Uh, and the mention of it being a bad example is it's a bad example if you actually like kill them, because then you have no more freeloaders. But on the other hand, like if you kill them, you're not getting their tax money. So it's one way or the other. It's better to look at it in terms of just like the deterrent effect of it being very unpleasant for one day. Um, but yeah, so the continent of exile was the alternative. So crucifixion was Galarian, and the alternative for Dathalon was the continent of exile, I think, or at least there was a comparison that Galarianites wouldn't be able to distinguish between those, the continent of exile and crucifixion, because they're both really unpleasant and they both have that expectation disincentive. But in addition, sending somebody to the continent of exile actually solves the problem of not having to deal with their misbehavior anymore.
Right.
So
Right.
I think I am no longer confused about that.
Wow.
Do you think I'm still confused about that? Did I get
Um,
anything?
it's hard to say because you could be saying things but mapping them internally to the wrong things. But I think it's very plausible that you are not confused.
Okay. That
So,
that
yeah.
at least my explanation has a kernel of truth.
Yes.
So yeah, thank you to the one butcher for helping clear that up in my head. I think I responded that I was still confused and there was a little bit more discussion, but I think this example really sort of ultimately was what crystallized it for me.
And in
So
that conversation, I said, life hack, just value other people's suffering terminally, and then you can make bargains in which they avoid some of it, which is,
right.
the genius strategy of Asmodeus,
Well,
maybe.
but that's I I don't know that that can I don't think that works because it doesn't have the same problem. It's not like it's solving the problem. You still have people who uh, don't comply with what you want them to do, right? And but if you terminally value suffering, then what you want them to do is pick the option where they suffer more, right?
Yeah. You could say, like, well, I terminally value them suffering. However, if they pay me taxes, they can buy uh, a reprieve from suffering. And I don't think the same logic follows from before, because it's not like you're just, if they refuse to buy a reprieve from suffering, you don't have any reason to make them suffer, because you already terminally value their suffering. Somebody pointed out under this, though, that Nethys terminally values explosions, yet Asmodeus is not going to accommodate him. And I think that might be, in the particular logic we're working with, that might just be about who gets there first, so to speak. Like they reason about well, if you hadn't become a god, I wouldn't have to accommodate you. Therefore, I'm not going to. Get wrecked.
Wait, so you're suggesting that if Nethys were one of the original gods, it would work differently?
I think so. I think so.
What? I think I was the one who brought up this theory that there's some uh, xenophobia among
Mhm.
the original gods, but I don't I don't know that. I think you sort of convinced me away from that, maybe. But in any case, I don't think that is part of Asmodeus's reasoning for telling Irori to get fucked. I think, as is in your words. But there is an element which I think I mentioned in this discussion as well, that uh, there's that gulf between them where they don't understand each other. And so it's not like Asmodeus is telling him that he's not going to be swayed by that because he hates Nethys, but more that he doesn't he doesn't have a full understanding of Nethys. Basically, Nethys is so crazy that even the gods that have perfect enough information about each other that they can predict in full what each other will answer, he doesn't know how Nethys will respond to things. And
Oh, it was the one butcher who said Asmodeus ignores threats even though Nethys intrinsically values explosions. So,
hmm,
you know, who's who has a better picture of what's going on? You, the listener, can decide.
yes. All right. I
Oh
think that's
yes,
enough on that subject for now. Is that
I googled Damon's Pathfinder, and the result is, it's not interesting. Who cares? They're two different
really? So
things.
it's
Yeah,
just like, is it not interesting in that it's not
it's
part
not.
of the original source book, or is it not
No,
interesting in that, like,
it's not interesting to me personally.
oh, you personally? Okay.
Yes, yes.
But there is a difference?
Yeah, yeah. The fun fact that there is a difference remains interesting.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
thanks. Thanks,
Yes.
Paizo, for confusing us all.
So the next piece of feedback I have is also from Fergim Nemahodva, which is the word for excessively complicated being derived from the capital of Taldor is indeed a reference to Byzantine, and Taldor itself, both in Paizo canon and various reifications, is basically fancy Roman Byzantine Empire ruling most of the continent at one point, but now being decaying empire hanging onto former glory. So that's a cool detail to learn,
That's
uh,
interesting. Yeah.
and I trust this man's opinion about Roman Empire history because his profile picture looks a little bit like Niccolo Machiavelli, which is good enough
Mm.
for me.
We got authority by association.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I really like that kind of thing where there's just something really fun and interesting, uh, where the author cares enough about the meta implications of what they're doing that they will like look for something in history to not just use as inspiration, but make it blatant that it is an inspiration. Like I expect it might not originally have been that they were going to put Byzantium or the Byzantine Empire in this, but they realized, you know what? Oh, there's this political situation, and we've got this historical thing. Why don't we add a few more elements of that, and then it'll enhance the allegory so we can teach some history subversively through this thing that people are going to enjoy interacting with.
They're pulling the same gambit as Cheliax rewriting history books,
Yeah,
except they're rewriting Roman history books and changing all the names to Taldor.
yeah, that's that's cool because it's kind of like historical fanfic in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Although it's obviously not Earth, but like the idea of this history playing out with different characters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's cool. All right. So I've got some more feedback. This from number one Demiurge Disrespecter says mentions the obvious problem Cheliax should have that I haven't seen anyone mention, and maybe there's an obvious answer to, is that if you're basically doomed to evil by growing up in Cheliax, there's a big incentive to not also be lawful. Because if you just die instead of being, because if you're lawful, or if you are not lawful, you just die when you die. It's just very painful. But you're at least not tortured for eons because evil, lawful people go to hell specifically. Sorry, that was my addendum. The quote continues. The incentive is to go around breaking promises and acting as erratically and unpredictably as possible, which would presumably make it a far less effective state. Uh, so I think the simple answer to this obvious problem is that yeah, but Cheliax wants it to be a more effective state, and so they crack down on this sort of thing. Although we may not have as much experience with secret police and such, uh, but they have ways to police regular citizens in a much more controlling way than here on Earth, where we don't have things like mind reading or detect alignment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's
Yeah. Especially because, like, I don't think the peasants can go around detecting their alignments. So, they're thinking, like, how fast can I break promises before they catch me
yeah,
to get
and
over to the chaotic side?
it's interesting because I don't think being lawful evil is something that comes naturally to people. And so, like, parents raising their children, those children are, I think, probably by nature chaotic. And I would expect children are usually more chaotic neutral, and so they have to be like taught how to be lawful evil. And specifically, they need to like train the chaos out of the kids and out of the kids' thoughts, because they don't want the mind readers going around and catching a kid thinking, oh, I'm gonna, um, you know, do something crazy, or I'm gonna leave Cheliax, or I'm going to destroy the system, and they're not old enough to know better. And I hate saying know better being the be subservient thing, but that's kind of what you have to be in Cheliax. And so child rearing must be very strange.
Yeah. I mean, uh, some would say that humans' distinct advantage is the ability to, like, copy other humans and our instinctive desire to have rules about what to do. Hence our many superstitions and societal institutions. So maybe children are actually lawful by default. That's my hot take for the day.
Ooh,
Yeah,
that
that's right.
that is an interesting theory. I think
Mm,
there will at least need to be some attempts to do chaotic things, because otherwise, how are they going to get the beatings in, right?
Mm. Mm.
So, so they've, and that's the thing about thought crime is in order to like if you want to punish people, you need to prove that you are willing to punish them, which means you somehow need to make sure there are people who will go against the rules or go against the system, just so you can make an example of them.
Galaxy brained.
Yeah. So there needs to be just enough sense of freedom that some people will try, but not enough that it overwhelms the town guard. Uh, yeah. So
Wait,
interest.
what are? Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was gonna change the subject.
No probs. I'm
So
about
what?
done.
Yeah, what are the afterlives for like? If you're lawful evil, I guess you go to hell. Unless maybe you go to Zon Kuthon land, and then the theory is if you went to the chaotic evil afterlife, which I don't remember which one it is, then your soul would just be destroyed.
Yeah, I think there's something about your soul being eaten if it goes to
Yeah.
Abaddon, right?
I guess Abaddon is neutral evil, and then if you go there, your soul just gets eaten. Like, I don't think it immediately gets eaten. I think just a spirit creature finds you and goes, "Well, I'm gonna eat you." It's a soul eat soul world. So yeah, I guess that checks out. You don't even have to be super chaotic. You just have to be like chaotic enough to
Neutral.
get yourself back to neutral. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, so Carissa's explanation at least says they eat their souls.
Hmm.
Uh, and uh, apparently, one of the reasons they have uh, certain god agreements is they realize Abaddon is just a really extra terrible place as far as uh, uh, profiting from soul energy, let's say. So apparently, Pharasma changed the rules so that people who are damned to Abaddon can actually choose either hell or the abyss. The abyss being, I believe, the chaotic uh, afterlife.
Chaotic evil.
Yeah, chaotic evil.
Mm. Well, I don't know anything about this abyss place, I suppose. I
Yeah,
even kind of doubt it will show up in the story because I just don't think we're going to visit like every D&D afterlife in this story. So,
yeah. It,
um,
I don't think we're going to visit it, but I am kind of curious because we have gotten some explanation or descriptions of the alignment grid, and Keltham, being naturally inquisitive, I would expect would want to know what all of the corners of this grid are. But there wasn't much discussion about the abyss, so we are kind of ignorant on some things that I don't
right.
know that we should be, but we don't have to be because we're assuming that the Pathfinder lore is allowed background knowledge or expected background knowledge, even.
Mm.
So, uh,
Well,
so,
yeah.
so do you have another comment? I believe.
Yes, I have another piece of feedback. This one is from Lord Surth. Regarding why Nethys says he has a plan, is vague about it, and leaves. The direct effect of his intervention is clear. Ptolemons was about to give Abadar permission to communicate with Keltham when Nethys interrupts. And I thought that was pretty cool. A good catch there. I
Yeah,
didn't
very
even
good catch.
didn't realize it because I think the tag after Atoleman says like "what" is just it cuts back to Keltham not getting talked to. So I
Yeah,
suppose that is logically what must have happened. And if you read the tag before, Abadar does seem to be like he might be about to get Atolemans to
get
decide his
permission.
way. And
Yeah.
then so Nethys's plan apparently relies on Keltham hanging out here in where he is longer and not immediately going to Abadar's land or whatever,
Yeah,
something.
which is kind of interesting because Ione being his oracle, has, I believe, already offered to run away with Keltham. Or maybe she's been instructed to do so. But I feel like that would give Nethys more influence over Keltham. But maybe he just doesn't want Ione running off before she realizes that she'll explode if she gets bored.
Yeah, I don't know. I
But
am assuming it's a brilliant Goldberg plan that
yeah,
relies on many things for what's basically appears to be no reason due to omniscience. But I don't know. Maybe at the end we'll go, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
yeah, and I think Nethys's plan is the thing I mentioned specifically as like this might be a puzzle that we are supposed to figure out from the authors. But yeah, that was a really good catch. That it looks like
Hmm.
Nethys specifically was the one who uh, sealed the deal as far as not letting Abadar communicate.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I've got another comment, just a correction from something I got wrong while we were talking. John Doe 7776059. I'm guessing it's okay to say that number on the air because it's public on the Discord. If it's not, too late.
That's his
Um,
social security number. Sorry.
Yeah. So anyhow, John Doe says that Mylol did not tell Carissa that she was wrong about all the pain and torture being for people's own good. He thought she wasn't ready to hear that, so instead he talked about her heresy being that she was into consent. Um, which yeah, I because I thought that Carissa was just finding that out basically, but I guess she didn't even get to find that out yet. She is still blissfully ignorant as of the start of book 10 at least.
Mm. All right. Well, keep an eye on that and see if she has any updates about that later.
Although that's kind of interesting how indoctrinated she is, being a full like combat wizard, presumably uh, finished her education. But I believe we have seen inside the mind of some of the other students, and they very clearly understand that hell is all about the torture for no good reason. Uh,
Mhm.
so Carissa is somehow managed to keep that in the face of whatever it is that let everybody else in on the understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, she has a very special mind, and that's why some god has some special plan for her specifically, maybe.
Indeed. Yeah. Um,
She has the ability to rationalize tall buildings in a single bound.
yeah. She has found the way, potentially.
Mhm.
Uh, so I've also I didn't cut any of this out for quoting, but there was a heated discussion, let's say, between myself and Oscar non-deterministic polymath about how Dathalon uses labor hours as units of currency.
Mm.
Uh, and I still personally do not uh, understand, well, really, a lot of anything about that. Um, I'm hoping that we will get into that in the story
Mm.
because that, it is a thing that comes up that they measure things in labor hours and not just on Dathalon, but they're able to respond uh, in that measurement on
Mhm.
Galarian, right?
Mhm.
That this is how many
Right.
hours it takes an unskilled person to do something, and that is the value of that thing.
Mhm.
So yeah, and maybe we'll see like, what is unskilled in a world that has magic. Are labor hours inflated or deflated as a result.
Well,
Maybe
I don't
there's,
think the unskilled labor hour guy is allowed to use magic. That seems like a skill to me.
I don't know, like maybe there are some things that are just casually available that
Mm,
we wouldn't
could
think
be.
about, but like, you know, everybody has, I don't know, a magic toilet such that they don't need actual like sewage
Mhm,
systems. You know, and just something as mundane as that can
mhm.
really change like how easy your life is and how much stuff you can get done.
That is true. That is true.
So yeah,
Ah,
if you are interested in seeing what is uh, observing and laughing at my ignorance, or piping in and contributing to that conversation, uh, you can find that in a thread uh, on our channel in the Discord. Uh, and that thread is titled Labor Hours as Currency. So please come participate and tell me how dumb I am.
nice. My next piece of feedback is from me, and they're just random thoughts I had about the characters' names that we've been introduced to so far.
Yes.
Um, Actually, that reminds me of a different piece of feedback, which is just a thing I never got to say. Which is, remember when we first met Espexia Rugaton, and she was hanging out with some guy who was like a duke or something, and he was
Who was
he
not very lawful, I think, by
uh,
comparison, right?
I suppose so, but he did a lot of really fun dialogue about like, okay, so we think that Asmodeus thinks that we should do blah blah blah. And
Yeah.
that was a beautiful segment, and I liked that character. I don't think he's ever coming back.
Uh, but yeah, if you can't remember his name, he definitely didn't have a portrait. I'm
Mhm,
pretty sure he didn't have
mhm.
a portrait.
Yeah.
Which that's kind of a little bit of a downside uh of this medium of Glowfix, that you kind of get some future information by seeing who gets to have their own character portrait, or in the case of people who are listening in the audio, like which characters are identified by their name and uh, screen name, right?
Like the
Because
little tagline they get.
yeah, the little tagline, your Keltham is lawful chaotic, and uh, Broom,
Yeah.
I believe, is stuck cleaning it up.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you can sort of tell that if there's a character who doesn't get one of those, they're probably either they're just not going to be seen from, or they're just not really going to be important.
Mhm.
And so that guy, like, yeah, he's interesting, and it's cool to have characters like that. But next time we see an assistant to Aspexia, it may be an entirely different person.
I think probably we're not going to see him again because his role of explaining that type of thing has been taken over by Fairer Maylol. Really.
Ah, that's true. We do have that meta information that, well, I
Yeah.
guess not really meta even. Um, that information that Carissa is now getting her insight into the Asmodean church from the project site head priest, I believe, is his title.
Is he? I
Isn't
know
he the
he's
head
the
priest?
I know he's like the site director, but I
The
don't know
site
if that actually
director,
makes
that's what
him
it is.
the head priest.
Okay.
Uh, yeah. So I could tell you my random thoughts about the characters' names, or you could do your next piece of feedback.
Did I have a next piece of feedback?
I imagine.
Uh, e- no, I don't think
Oh,
I
no, I guess not.
do. No, I think that's all it. There's a
Mm-hmm.
comment from me, but that is a comment in response to your next piece of feedback.
Yes. So these are just random thoughts I had about the characters' names. I have about three, um, in no particular order. I am especially reading through audio. I see why they did it, and it makes sense in terms of flavor. but I find it very annoying that there's this important god character called Asmodeus, and then there's a Heremite called Asmodia, and so whenever I'm reading it, I think, oh, it's an Asmodeus part. Oh no, it's an Asmodia part. Okay,
Yeah.
you with the
Speaking as a
one different
man,
syllable.
yeah, speaking as somebody with uh, a name that is a religious character, that that can be annoying. I presume it's a lot more annoying for your Jesuses or your Mohammeds, uh, but
Uh,
but
yeah, but
yeah,
they're not
unfortunately, that's
in
the
the
thing
same
that
story as Jesus, you know.
mm, yeah, but from their perspective, Asmodeus is still very separate from them.
That's true.
The closest connection being this chain of command or
Right.
whatever through the church,
Yeah, I
which is
definitely get in universe why they did it. Just like we do it in our universe.
yeah. But yes, if we are seeing a lot of speaking lines from Asmodeus and Asmodia, that can be confusing, I'm sure, and frustrating.
My other piece of feedback, actually, I have a couple. One, you tend to say Meritexel as Marichel, and I didn't correct you because I think it's fun that we mispronounce all these names all the time.
I am fairly certain I am the correct one in this case.
Really?
Uh, at least there has been discussion on the Discord about this, uh, and the X having the CH sound, the ch, is a common thing. I haven't seen actually the T in front of the X personally. That's kind of new for me, so I was stumbling over it.
Mm.
But yeah, I think Marichel. How did you
Mm.
say it's pronounced by your reader?
Meritexel,
Meritexel. Interesting. Uh,
which even if I'm proved to be wrong, which is very easy actually. If I am wrong, I will simply continue to pronounce it Meritexel.
well, that one does, I think, more emphasize the merit uh, situation with her, which I think is in contrast to her actual background, which we got in book 9, which I think
Mhm,
she is, uh, if I recall correctly, she's sort of very privileged. Her
mhm.
parents are a wizard and a cleric, uh, and she grew up, let's say, rich enough that she could make orphans her servants,
Nice.
essentially. So yeah, I don't know if she is at wizard school on merit, but maybe we will see from her. Uh,
Well, she is
she will
the
live up to her family name.
daughter of a wizard and a cleric, so she's probably there. She's probably has a lot of merit herself.
Yeah.
Next point. I found it funny. I don't think this is wrong, but you pronounced a character's name as Tonia because that's how it's spelled. But meanwhile, I've been pronouncing that name as Tanya, and I think it's very funny that there are all these fantasy names and then Tanya.
Yeah. Yeah, that is one of those names that I definitely could see pronounced multiple ways.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
but yeah, I think it's not spelled the same as the common Tanya that
It is not.
I am familiar with. So,
No.
but yeah, it's still uh, fun to see characters with very real world names next to your Legolos's
Mm,
and your Marichels
yeah.
and uh, yeah.
Um, yeah, and my final feedback is there's this character, Ione Sala, and I think that's suspicious. I mean, Ione, I think is some sort of Greek sounding name. Uh, but it's suspicious because her name kind of spells like I one is all, and she's now a prophet of Nethys, who's kind of like everywhere. Really makes you think.
Yeah,
That's all I have to say about that one.
that is a curious I didn't think about that part with her last name being combined because usually just think of her as Ayane, not Ayane Sala. But yeah, that is all is kind of alluding to her being an oracle of Nethys.
Maybe. If you read it backwards, it kind of says a lass in OE. So if OE meant something, that would also work.
Yeah, I have looked at some of these characters' names backward, and I unfortunately have not run into any clever reverse names so far. So
Well,
yeah,
I guess that is all of our feedback for
cool.
now.
Yeah,
Uh,
which means I think at this point we can uh, transition into the cut, the outtakes from
mm,
last week. Uh, so, but we do know that Keltham's like his main advantage here on Galarian is his intelligence. So having a wisdom score of 15 or higher means he is gifted in other ways as well. But now I'm curious, what is his wisdom score? And so I've got a bunch of notes here, and I'd like to get into them.
oh,
Do you have a comment on what I've just said?
wait, so what's the evidence that he has a wisdom score of 15 or higher? Which
Uh,
spell was it?
so we don't have evidence that he does, but we know that in order to cast commune, in order to be able to talk with Abadar later, he'll need to have a score of
I
15
see.
or higher.
Okay,
Um,
right.
so right now he hasn't seen fifth level spells.
Mhm.
But we've also learned, at least from security, that you can fill spell slots with lower level spells. We do know from game mechanics that Keltham is actually level 7. So he shouldn't have any fifth level spells yet. Um, but the number of spells he does have is related to his wisdom score because
Ooh.
Pathfinder gives you bonus spells, bonus spell slots based on how big your wisdom score is. Basically, it's you get a bonus spell in each spell level, roughly, for each bonus level in your score. So, like a wisdom of 0 gives you no bonuses because you don't get bonus cantrips or horizons. Uh, but a score of 12 gives you a +1 first level spell. A score of 14 gives you +1 second level spell because you have a +2 modifier, and so on and so forth. And so we've seen that Keltham has 6 first circle spells. And oh goodness, I closed this tab. But he has 6 first circle spells and 4 second circle spells. So at 7th level, he should have 5 level 1s and 4 level 2s, which means either he's got a higher level slot filled with a first level spell, or he has a bonus spell slot in level 1, which would mean he has a wisdom score of at least 12. So we know one thing about him, because, well, right, he could have a low level in a high level slot. But so he has to have at least 12 in that particular case. But we know he can cast 4th level spells, and you need to have 10 plus spell level in order to cast that type of spell. So his score is at least 14.
Ah,
But if your score is 14 or above, that means you have a +2 modifier, which means he should have a bonus spell in of level 2. So he should have 5 second circle spells instead of 2 second circle spells. Um, so there's a few possibilities for this. Uh, yeah. So the first possibility is that Abadar just didn't give him all the spells that he could get. But this would be weird. It would be okay for arcane spellcasters like wizards to prepare fewer spells than you are able to at the beginning of the day because arcane spellcasters, since they prepare their spells by just like working on them, studying them, refreshing their memory, they can do that anytime throughout the day. And so if they leave spell slots open, that gives them more flexibility throughout the day. I think we had a note about a wizard preparing share language before, when Keltham did a dumb. But for divine spellcasters, they get all their spells at the beginning of the day because it's too expensive for the gods to uh, talk to them, basically, or interact with mortals more than once a day. Or maybe it's just unfair for them to do it for some people and not others. But the main thing is, we've already seen, or at least we've heard from, I think, Carissa, that clerics only get their spells once a day. So it wouldn't make sense to leave a spell slot open. So uh, it might have been that Abadar had an idea of what spells he was going to give Keltham already, but he wasn't prepared for Nethys to jump in and say, "Hey, give 4 more levels to Keltham." And so he didn't have the like level 7 cleric spells prepared, but he had, at least level 3 cleric spells. So that's a possibility. Uh, there's also the obvious possibility that Lintamond miscounted or forgot about the requirement that you have to have wisdom of 10 plus spell level. Or that was house ruled. I actually haven't seen that rule come up often, but it is there, part of rules as written, which for the most part we've been following so far. But like, and part of being able to follow rules as written is that like it allows us to metagame. And for rationalist fiction, for ratfic, the authors like us metagaming, I think. The authors like us being able to speculate based on our knowledge. And if we have meta knowledge about the system that they think is, common knowledge, it's a good idea for us to use that to think about it. So I'm hoping that they're not just house ruling away this rule. But yeah, I've got more on this later when we actually see Keltham's spell list, which actually I think comes next, right?
Yeah, it's just the next thing that happens. Yeah.
And our listeners can find that on the main episode. But for now, let's go back and look at Keltham's cleric domains. He only has 4 second circle spells, and so I wouldn't expect Lintaman to make the same mistake twice. So either the 4 second circle spells means he doesn't have a bonus spell for +2, which means he's 12 or 13 wisdom, or they've house ruled. Or, dun dun dun, Keltham may not have been receiving all of his domain spells. Now, this is a weird thing about clerics, is that their spells are not just like any spells from the cleric list. One of their allotted spell slots in each level has to be from a part of the spell list that belongs to their god. Their
like
god,
Abadar's
or
truth telling.
right, not necessarily their god, but their domain, which is why they're called domain spells. Clerics get to pick 2 domains. I'm not sure, but I think it's recommended that the first one be from their god at least. So it's very likely that he has an Abadar domain as the first one. But the second one could be anything. And my first theory here, because this is hard to game, is that his second domain might be a Nethys domain, because Nethys is kind of like his second god. Nethys is paying for 4 of his cleric levels, right?
Interesting.
But anyhow, so here's some domain spells I have discovered. So first level domain spells are Sanctuary and Comprehend Languages. Oh, these are the domain spells that he's been given, either today or yesterday. So that means if it was his domain spell, then it's if he was given a domain spell, it was one of these, basically. So Sanctuary and Comprehend Languages. Sanctuary is a domain spell for protection, which is an Abadar domain, and also Knowledge with the subdomain Eon, and Liberation subdomain Freedom, which all sound like Keltham type things, right? Protection, he wants to save the world, and it's Abadar. Knowledge, obviously, and liberation. He did not choose his domains, but he did come here basically freedom and liberation. He wants to liberate the world from the chaotic influence that the world wound is. Right, that's the first thing he encountered, and he's like, well, we need to stop this, right?
And generally, he wants people to be free to pursue their own ends.
That as well is also very important. So it could be one of those domains. The other one he's seen is Comprehend Languages, which is a rune subdomain language, or a mind domain, or a herald domain. None of them are Abadar. So I don't think he's a herald. That seems weird. And I suspect he's not a language. Although Baseline is an awesome language, he has not shown effort or particular interest in bringing Baseline itself as a language to Galarian. So I'm skeptical of that one.
Mm-hmm. I see.
So that's his first level spells. So probably Sanctuary, if anything, is a first level spell that is in his domain slot. Second level, he has seen now Protection from Evil, which is of the good domain and the Elysium domain, which is a neutral good domain. Some of the domains are restricted by alignment, so I just marked that down. So he is not neutral good, so that it's unlikely. Or at least he does not know himself to be neutral good, because he thinks his alignment may be concealed from himself somehow. But we know that he's true neutral, I think. Or true neutral or lawful neutral.
I guess all we know is that for certain is that Abadar is his godly patron, and therefore
that's right. Abadar is lawful neutral.
Gives him like a lawful neutral aura. So you've told me.
So we don't know his domain, although neutral good is more than one step away from Abadar, is it?
Right.
Lawful, neutral good. Yeah, that's 2 steps away, I think. And so unlikely that one. Possibly good as a domain, which would be weird because he has not at all considered himself good. But I guess we've seen that at least on like a metaphysical level, like from our perspective, he's pretty good. He's all for the like making people better versions of themselves and making everything positive sum and nobody hurting each other, which is kind of a good thing. But interestingly, the good domain is, at least not from my notes, is not alignment restricted. So, so that's Protection from Evil. He's also seen Eagle's Splendor. Wait, did he get Eagle's Splendor?
I think he Eagle Splendored himself.
Yes, that's the charisma one, right? And that one's from Arborea, which is a chaotic good. So I would say quite definitely not. And he has now seen Augury, which is part of several domains. It is Destiny, Dream, Fate, Oracle, and Planning. And I think of those, the most likely would be Planning. Yeah. The others, yeah. Destiny and Fate, I don't think he's a big fan of those things. Dream, I don't think he's a dreamer, although that may be a reference to the possibility that he didn't actually die, and he's just dreaming this whole thing, so who knows? Oracle, probably not. He is not communicating with his god. So those are his second level. I think most likely is probably planning. But that he's only seen augury, and that's today. So if that's today and all his spell slots were filled, he probably should have seen 5-second circle spells. But he only saw 4. And then level 3, nothing except Summon Monster 3, actually, which is fun. It's part of the Celestia domain, which is lawful good, Summoner domain, the Abyss, which is chaotic evil, Arborea, which is chaotic good, and Bator, which is lawful evil. And none of those seem particularly likely. I didn't look up the full lore on Bator, but I don't think it's even a rules as written domain. I think that's one of the extended universe or supplementary things. I'm not sure.
I see why you messaged me earlier saying that you had spent a lot of time cracking open the Pathfinder books and researching things.
Oh yes, and yeah, we're coming up on 2 hours of chat, and we're almost through the very start of chapter 1 in this section. So anyhow, without domain spells, he has 4-0, 4 first level, 3 second level, 2 third level, and 1 fourth level. But he didn't receive any third level domain spells yesterday, and no fourth level domain spells today. So let's see. In order to have had a fourth level domain spell. Oh, sorry, I missed one. Fourth level, he had a domain spell, Spell Immunity, which is part of the Strength domain and part of the Protection domain again. So I think it's highly likely that he is Protection domain, because that's an Abadar domain, and he has seen 2 domain spells from that. But he has no fourth level domain spells today. Although I can't say whether you're allowed to forego a fourth level domain spell for a lower level non-domain spell, because early judgment is one of his 2 fourth level domain spells. Or sorry, one of his 2 fourth level spell slots is spent on a second level spell, early judgment. So I don't know, but probably he has to have a fourth level bonus spell. Again, protection is very likely. A runner-up would be knowledge, which is associated with comprehend languages, and its subdomain Eon is associated with sanctuary. And in particular, knowledge is associated with Nethys, which, that goes into my potentially his second domain is from the second god who paid for his clericing. Which, by the way, going back to Nethys paying for 4 cleric levels, the cost of class levels goes up each level. So Nethys has put in way more energy into Keltham's cleric levels than Abadar has, like way more. So knowledge is possible, and the subdomain education is associated with Fox's cunning, which he wants. And so if he had the knowledge domain, he would be able to get Fox's cunning. So that might be a potential they might be keeping that in their pocket for a later reveal, is that you actually can get Fox's cunning. Curiously, there are no domain spells from the law domain, and there are no second or third level spells from either of those 2 domains. Protection has the second level spelled Shield Other and Protection from Energy, which would both, if Keltham got those, would suggest he's under threat, which technically he isn't. Because, of course, Abadar made a deal with Asmodeus not to fuck with him. So it would be reasonable for Abadar to forego giving him those domain spells.
Mhm.
Knowledge has the second level spell Detect Thoughts. So that would complete that set. And Speak with Dead. So uh, my theories here is that Abatar may not like Detect Thoughts because deal making is best with um, uh, deal making is like, it maybe is best with perfect information, but having concealed thoughts is sort of part of uh, the ritual of deal making, right?
Right.
You can't really do a going back and forth in deal making if you already know everything that the other person knows,
Yeah. Although I
especially
guess,
in involving their mind state.
the gods of Galarian probably do that all the time. So who knows if
Hmm.
Abadar thinks it's particularly important to have the
Well,
mental barrier.
they don't have perfect information though. Like we saw the interaction in the pseudo hypothetical chat where they did not have access to uh, part of Nethys until they specifically asked Nethys to go to get Nethys. Um, so maybe that's not a god thing. Uh, so that it's possible that that's why he didn't get that. And then Speak with Dead in the knowledge domain. Uh, there are a couple reasons not to have that. One is that it's creepy, and we've already seen that Keltham is easily creeped out. And the other is it's potentially not going to work across the Forbiddens anyway. Um, so, so it's possible that he just didn't get domain spells in 2 and 3. Which leads
Okay.
me to my conclusion, which is the likely possibility is that Keltham has a +1 bonus spell in 4th level, which makes him at least 18 wisdom, and has protection and or knowledge as a domain, so he can still have 6 first level spells without being 20 wisdom, which
Mm.
is still something because 18 wisdom is at least as high as his intelligence.
Mhm.
And I don't think Keltham is as wise as he is intelligent. I think we've seen enough of
Mm.
his background that like he's got the nerd compulsion to correct people even if it uh, makes them irritated, which I think indicates not a high wisdom. He's not great at reading the room, I would say.
Well, back on Dathalon, that would be a fun conversational topic, I assume.
Yeah. So I got the impression from the aside uh, on the drowning child, right? The story in Keltham's backstory, how he was interacting with the rest of the class. Um, uh, I think there's something else I recall, but it might be future knowledge, so I won't mention it. But in that, it seemed like him going against the rest of the class was recognized by the Watcher the as an intelligent thing, but also as a not friendly thing.
Mhm.
And they were trying to instill that understanding in Keltham that hey, that's not a friendly thing. You're right, but you're mean or not. Yeah. The point is, I think the way he thinks, even if he does now think in wise ways, I don't think that's a native thing, a natural thing that comes from having a high wisdom stat. I think that would be trained stuff he got from school. So
Well,
weird.
I remember that story going the other way, where the reason they had him in that class was to teach the other children that he was actually wiser than they in refusing to reject parts of himself.
Well, okay, so this definitely depends on how you view wisdom. Um, so maybe he is very high wisdom if your interpretation of that is correct. But sort of what I see it as is that wisdom is a thing that goes along with society. That if you are wise, then you are able to get along with people. If you are smart, you
Those,
are able to be effective. But this is, the difference between being book smart and street smart, basically. So I see street smart as wisdom and book smart as intelligence. And I think that class was showing that the teacher showing Keltham's thought processes to the class was sort of them countering the class's street smarts with Keltham's book smarts, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. Do
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
I also
Although,
go ahead.
I also don't know why, like you say, maybe the wisdom was trained into him, but I think that's just what wisdom is supposed to be, right? Like, I'm not really sure how D&D works, because we all know there's sort of a thing called intelligence in real life. That's how fast you can think or whatever, and that's really hard to change. But
Mm-hmm.
wisdom seems to be in real life about like learning how the world works and stuff. I'm not really sure what it's supposed to be in D&D, but if it's like that, then I think you could just learn a lot of, life
Uh,
lessons.
so I don't recall the exact list of skills, but I think for most of the things that you would think of as things you learn that uh, include how the world works, I think those are skills that would be trained. Whereas your six stats, your strength, constitution, dexterity, wisdom, intelligence, charisma, those are those are natural. They're basically your DNA. Your character's DNA gives you those stats. You can train up from those stats in any skill, anything associated with that, but the stats generally, I will say, don't change. There is, however, an exception which I did not consider, but you reminded me of with this. So I might be wrong, which is that uh, every 4 class levels specifically, you get to add a +1 to a stat. So he could have had 17 wisdom on Dathalon, but after getting 7 cleric levels, part of
Oh,
being in cleric gives him 1 more to his wisdom score.
maybe,
So that is
maybe.
possible.
Yeah,
Possible.
that would be interesting, and it would fit sort of the different things we know about Dathalon's distribution of skills versus Galarian's.
Right. Yeah, I
Um,
like it could also be a difference in uh understanding of wisdom between myself and Eliezer, not just between myself and the rule book.
sure.
That
Or
Eliezer may have a interesting concept of wisdom versus intelligence in the rules. And the reason I don't understand it is because I don't understand Eliezer.
Yeah, I can definitely picture like when they were writing the rule book, they were like, okay, what's wisdom? It's like a wise old man who's very humble. And Eliezer would say, no, it's like when you understand how the world works. What does that have to do with smiling pleasantly at people?
Yeah, that humility and dignity and such are also curious concepts that we've seen can be interpreted in different ways uh, in this
True,
story.
true. Although I mean, you can definitely train strength though. People do it in real life all the time. I'm sure that must be what they're talking about in D&D when your strength goes up, right?
So,
You just eat some iron.
yes and no. The thing about strength is that almost anything you do with strength is itself a skill. So you can get skill points in, uh, for example, jump or leap, whatever it's called. You can get skill points in climb. Um, I don't think you can get skill points in like lift or carry, but there are feats for that give you more carry weight and such. There is a skill for no, maybe there's not a skill for dodge. That's a reflex save. Maybe there's a dodge skill. I've forgotten. But most of the things you would think of as training quote unquote strength would in Pathfinder be better represented by skill points than by additional STR strength points.
Yeah, I mean, there's still the effect that if you lift weights, then your muscles will be bigger, and even if you haven't been training climbing, then you'll be able to climb better until you get too muscly, and then you're too heavy and you fall down. But yeah, that's
I
all
don't think
that's all
there's
I have to say about
synergies
that. I
here.
don't know.
Yeah, there's not a dodge spell. Is there a jump spell? They actually might have gotten rid of that. There is not a jump spell. I lied to you. I lied to your face.
There's no jump skill in Pathfinder.
There is no jump skill in Pathfinder.
They've
Interesting.
skipped leg day.
I think there was in D&D 3. I'm not going to look that up right now because we've
Good.
gone already almost 2 hours, and we are, depending on how much more you have to say, at the end of
True.
the first chapter of this reading.
Yes. Yes. Well, walk me through your explicit Bayesian calculations about Keltham's whiz score.
No thanks. You've heard enough on that, I think. I
Okay.
think
Well,
most likely is he's 18 wisdom.
nice.
Which I would not see him as 18 wisdom from behavior or inner thoughts. But I am also different from Dathalon, so
True. True. I imagine this kind of thing is what Yarwain meant when he wrote Nethys finds it useful to overhear your conversations. Should we, I don't know,
wrap it up.
wrap it up, say things by which to wrap? Yeah. And I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I am Flashy Man.
And I am Cakoluchiam.